The judge hadn't even walked in yet, and everyone in that courtroom already knew how this would end. I've seen this scene 100 times. You can feel it. On one side of the room, a man in a suit that cost more than most people's rent, flanked by two lawyers with perfect hair and cold smiles. He's relaxed, leaning back like he's waiting for a coffee order, not the end of his marriage. On the other side, his wife. She's alone. One chair, one legal pad, one pen. Her dress is plain, no wedding ring. Her hands are clasped so tight her fingers are bloodless. She's not looking at her husband's team. She's staring at the wood grain of the table, like she's trying to memorize it. The gallery is almost empty. A couple of law students, a bored reporter. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that means everyone thinks this is a waste of time. That the result is so obvious, why even bother showing up? The husband's lead lawyer stands up. His voice is smooth, practiced. He tells the story they've all agreed on. His client, the hard-working entrepreneur, a builder, a provider, and the woman across the room, a dependent, a spouse who chose not to build a career, who contributed nothing but spent generously. He uses words like burden and generosity. He presents charts showing money going one way, and the wife, she just sits there, taking it. Her own lawyer, a man who looks tired, gives a weak objection. It's like watching someone try to stop a truck with a cardboard shield. The judge barely glances up from her notes. This is the moment. This is where you, watching, feel that knot in your stomach, because you've seen this before, in life, in movies, in stories, the powerful man, the quiet woman, the system that seems designed for the one with the best lawyer. The husband lets out a soft, almost silent sigh of satisfaction. He checks his watch. He's planning his lunch celebration. And the woman in the plain dress, she finally moves. She picks up her pen. And she writes one single word on that blank pad, just one. From where I sat, I couldn't read it, but I saw her underline it, twice. Before I tell you what that word was, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a room where everyone had already decided you'd lost? Where your truth didn't seem to matter at all? If you know that feeling, you're already connected to this story. You understand the silence. So hit subscribe. Right now. Not for me, but because here, we follow the stories of people who wrote a different ending when everyone else was writing them off. They called her to the stand. This is where they break you. In front of the judge, under oath, with your soon-to-be ex-husband smiling politely from his seat. His lawyers are good. They're not yelling. They're surgical. Is it true, the lawyer begins, his tone almost gentle, that you did not hold employment at any point during the 11-year marriage? Her voice is low but clear. Yes. And is it true you never involved yourself in the operations or finances of your husband's successful business? A pause. She looks at her hands. I was not involved. So you trusted him to manage everything. All the assets, all the accounts, all the investments. I did. She says it to the room. I trusted him. When she said that word trusted, the husband almost smiled, a real one this time. It was the smile of a man who just heard his opponent admit to bringing a spoon to a gunfight. A murmur went through the few people watching. Even the law students shook their heads. In a divorce court, trust is not a defense. It's a liability. The lawyer kept going, painting a picture of willful ignorance, of a life spent spending, not building. He presented credit card statements with her signature. He asked about vacations, about cars, about her daily life of, as he put it, managing the home. With every answer, she seemed to shrink. Her shoulders curled in. She agreed with his framing. She didn't fight. She just confirmed it all. It was a masterpiece of humiliation. They weren't just saying she didn't contribute. They were making her say it herself. They were having her build the case against her, brick by painful brick. By the time they finished, the judge was looking at her with something close to pity. The husband's team was packing up a file, already moving on mentally. The reporter was typing, probably drafting the headline, "Entrepreneur Prevails in Straightforward Divorce." They all saw a woman who had nothing, no money, no career, no leverage, just a story about trust that nobody wanted to hear. But I watched her eyes. When she stepped down from the stand and walked back to her lonely table, her head was bowed. But her eyes, they weren't looking at the floor. They were fixed on a point on the wall, steady, unblinking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even sad. She was waiting. So how did she get here? To this moment, sitting alone, letting them call her a burden? Let me show you. Not with a big flashback, but with small moments. The kind you don't notice until you put them together. 3 years before this day, she's in the home office. She's bringing him a coffee. He's on the phone, his back to her. "Just move it to the holding company," he says, voice low. "No, don't email that. Call me from the private line." He feels her presence, turns, and gives her a warm, empty smile. He hangs up. "Just business, honey." She smiles back, places the coffee down, and her eyes catch the corner of a spreadsheet on his monitor, a column of numbers with a bank's name she doesn't recognize. She says nothing. 2 years before this day, a statement arrives in the mail by mistake. It's for a corporate credit card. His business name is on it, but the mailing address is a P.O. box in another state. The purchases are for luxury hotels, jewelry stores. She takes a picture of it with her phone, just the header and the address. Then she puts it back in the envelope and leaves it on his desk. "This came for you," she says later. He thanks her, doesn't mention it again. 1 year before this day, at a family dinner, his brother jokes, "How's the villa in Costa Rica treating you?" Her husband kicks his brother under the table, laughs it off. "A man can dream." Everyone laughs. She laughs too, sipping her water. That night, she opens a simple notebook she keeps in her bedside drawer. She writes a date. She writes, "Costa Rica and brother's slip." This was her work. This was her contribution. While he thought she was just living, just spending, just trusting, she was recording. Not with anger, not with confrontation, with the calm focus of someone who knows the storm is coming and is quietly building the only shelter that will matter, the truth. Back in the courtroom, the husband's lead lawyer stood for his final move. "Your Honor," he said, sounding almost gracious. "Given the respondent's clear lack of marital contribution, but acknowledging the length of the union, my client is prepared to offer a settlement." He paused, letting the supposed generosity hang in the air. "A one-time payment of $75,000. And she may keep the personal vehicle in her name, a 2014 sedan." A few people in the gallery shifted. It was a brutal offer. After 11 years, after a marriage to a man whose business was worth millions, it was an insult dressed up as a gift. It was designed to make her look greedy if she fought it. The husband nodded slowly, a look of pained benevolence on his face. "Look how reasonable I am," his expression said. "Look how I'm taking care of her, even now." The judge looked at the wife's tired lawyer. "Does your client accept this offer?" This was the moment, the pressure point. Take this pathetic deal and slink away, or fight a battle you have no visible ammunition to win. Everyone stared at the wife. She had been so passive, so agreeable. Would she finally break? Would she cry, beg, make a scene? Her lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. She listened. Then she shook her head. Just once. A small, firm movement. Her lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we request a brief recess before we respond to this proposal." The husband couldn't hide it. A flash of irritation, then smug victory. He thought she was stalling. He thought her lawyer needed time to convince her to take the money. He leaned over to his own team and whispered something that made them smile. As the judge called for a 15-minute recess, the wife stood. She smoothed her plain dress. She didn't look at her husband's celebration. She didn't look at anyone. She picked up her purse, a simple, worn leather bag, and walked out of the courtroom alone. The door swung shut behind her. The husband laughed softly, shaking his head. 15 more minutes of her life wasted, he said to his lead attorney, just loud enough for people to hear. He was so sure. They all were. But she wasn't going to her car. She wasn't going to cry in the bathroom. She was walking down the hall to a small conference room. And inside that room, 7 people were waiting for her. They had been there for 2 hours, sitting in silence, ready. You know what the real betrayal is? It's not the lies. It's when they offer you pennies for your years and call it generosity. If you've ever had your worth calculated by someone who undervalued you from the start, you feel this. You're not just watching a story, you're remembering a feeling. Don't just scroll, subscribe. Join people here who know that the true measure of someone isn't what they take, but what they survive. The bailiff called the court back to order. The husband and his lawyers returned first, their confidence restored. They had used the break to make lunch plans. The wife's chair was still empty. The husband checked his watch again, a performance of impatience for the judge. Then, the door at the back of the courtroom opened. The wife walked in, the same as before. Head down, hands clasped. She took her seat, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, people began to enter. A man in a sharp, conservative suit. A woman with a professional briefcase. Another man, older, with a stern, calm expression. They didn't look at the husband. They didn't look at the wife. They simply found seats in the empty rows and sat down, silent, still. Then more came. 2 more, then 3. Well-dressed, serious-faced. They filled the back row, then the middle row. The space that had felt so empty and final just minutes ago was now occupied. The energy in the room completely changed. The air got heavy. The husband's smile vanished. He stared at the new faces. He recognized them. His head snapped toward his lead attorney, who was now flipping urgently through his notes. His forehead creased. The judge looked up, surprised by the sudden audience. "Counselor," she said to the wife's lawyer, "are you expecting additional witnesses?" The tired-looking lawyer stood up. For the first time, he stood up straight. "We are, Your Honor." The defense calls its first witness. The husband's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This is a blatant attempt to ambush the proceedings. We were not provided with a witness list of this magnitude." The judge looked from the packed gallery back to the wife. The wife was looking at her own hands, but there was no fear in her posture now. There was a stillness, a readiness. "Overruled," the judge said, her voice firm. "The witness may be called." When the room filled with people he never thought would stand against him, that's when his world cracked. If you've ever hoped for just one person to walk into the room and be on your side, you felt that moment. This is about more than a divorce. It's about being seen. If you believe in that, subscribe. This channel is for everyone who waited for their moment to be seen, and for everyone still waiting. The wife's lawyer spoke a name. The defense calls Michael Vance to the stand. A man in his late 50s stood up from the front row of the gallery. He walked past the husband's table without a glance. He was sworn in. This was her uncle. "Mr. Vance," the lawyer began, "can you describe your relationship to the respondent?" "I'm her mother's brother, her uncle. And are you familiar with the Vance Family Trust, established by her grandparents?" "I am. I'm a co-trustee." The husband's lawyer was on his feet again. "Relevance, Your Honor? This is a marital dissolution, not a probate hearing." The wife's lawyer didn't wait for the judge. He placed a document on the projector. It appeared on the screen behind the judge. It was a trust distribution record. "Your Honor, this shows that 12 years ago, just prior to the marriage, my client was the sole beneficiary of a trust valued at $300,000. The room was silent. The husband stared at the screen. "Mr. Vance," the lawyer continued, "what happened to those funds?" The uncle's voice was flat, matter of fact. 2 months after the wedding, my niece and her husband came to me. He said he was an expert investor. He said he could grow the money for their future as a couple. He asked for control. She trusted him. I, allowed the funds to be transferred to an account he managed. And what is the current value of that trust? The uncle looked directly at the husband for the first time. 0. The last statement showed a balance of $87.42. The money was moved out in a series of transfers over 4 years. We have the records. The lawyer put another document on the screen, a bank transfer slip. The signature line was clear. It was the husband's signature. The description read, "Transfer to business operating account, Alexander Holdings." The husband's face was white. He leaned over and began whispering frantically to his attorney. The wife did not look at the screen. She did not look at her uncle. She looked at the judge. And for the first time, she wasn't waiting. She was watching. The husband's lawyers were scrambling now. Their objections sounded thin, desperate. "This is a separate financial matter," one argued. "It has no bearing on the marital estate." The judge looked over her glasses. "You claimed your client was the sole financial architect of this marriage, that she contributed nothing. This appears to be a $300,000 contribution that vanished under his control. I'd say it has bearing." She turned back to the wife's lawyer. "Continue." And he did. He called the wife's older sister to the stand, a calm, sharp-eyed woman who worked as a CPA. She testified about a company, not her brother-in-law's main business, but a smaller one. Apex Logistics LLC, she said. It was formed during the 3rd year of the marriage. And who were the listed owners of Apex Logistics? The lawyer asked. According to the articles of incorporation I obtained, the sister said, placing another document on the projector, the owners were my brother-in-law's cousin and an old college friend. On the screen, the names were clear. Neither was the husband's. And what was the business purpose of Apex Logistics? On paper, freight brokerage, the sister said. In reality, according to its bank records, which I subpoenaed, it served as a pass-through. Over $800,000 from my brother-in-law's primary business was paid to Apex for consulting fees over 5 years. Those fees were then distributed to the owners, who, testimony would show, funneled the majority back to my brother-in-law in cash. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. Dates, amounts, a perfect, quiet siphon. The husband had stopped whispering. He was just staring straight ahead, his jaw locked tight. The elegant story of the generous provider was crumbling, replaced by a much uglier one. A man who didn't just provide, but one who hid, who diverted. The final family witness was her cousin, a woman who lived in Miami. She worked in international real estate. "Do you recognize this address?" the lawyer asked, displaying a photo of a sleek, modern beachfront condo. "Yes," the cousin said. "Unit 4B, Marina Vista Residences, Limon, Costa Rica. And how are you familiar with it?" "I was contacted 2 years ago by a property management company there. They had my contact information as an emergency backup for the owner. There was a leak in the unit above. They needed owner approval for repairs." "And who did they list as the owner?" The cousin looked at the husband. "A holding company called Caribe Haven Assets, registered in the British Virgin Islands. I did some digging, which is my job. The trail was complex, but the beneficial owner, the person whose passport was used to open the initial corporate bank account, was him," she pointed. Her finger was steady. A passport copy flashed on the screen. His photo, his signature, a date stamp from 5 years ago. The purchase price, the lawyer said, was $1.2 million, paid in full from a bank in Singapore. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the projector fan. This was no longer about a hidden trust or a side company. This was a secret life, a second asset stream, parked in the sun, far away from any marital estate. The wife finally moved. She turned her head. She looked directly at her husband, not with anger, not with tears. She looked at him with the clear, cold recognition of someone finally seeing the full picture. The man who offered her $75,000 for 11 years owned $1 million beach house she never knew existed. He couldn't meet her eyes. He looked down at his own hands, the same hands that had signed all those papers, now clenched in his lap. His lead attorney stood up, his voice stripped of all its earlier polish. "Your Honor, we need time to review these allegations. We move for a continuance." The judge didn't even look up from the passport image on the screen. Denied. The wife's lawyer let the silence hang after the judge said, "Denied." He let the husband and his team feel the walls closing in. Then he turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense calls one final witness, Mr. David Ferris." A door at the side of the courtroom opened. A man in his late 40s, wearing a simple blue suit, walked in. He looked nervous, but resolved. He avoided looking at the husband's table completely. This was new. This wasn't family. The husband stared, his eyes wide with a kind of dawning horror. He knew this man. David Ferris was sworn in. His voice was quiet but clear. "Mr. Ferris, what was your professional relationship with the petitioner?" the lawyer asked. "For 6 years, I was his independent financial advisor. I managed certain investment portfolios and provided strategic planning." "And when did this relationship end?" "Approximately 14 months ago, he terminated our contract." "Why did he terminate it?" Ferris shifted in his seat. "He gave a reason about cost-cutting. But the real reason came during our final meeting. He gave me a new set of instructions that I was not comfortable following." "What were those instructions?" Ferris took a breath. He presented a plan titled Marital Asset Restructuring. It involved moving approximately 60% of his liquid investment holdings funds that were held in joint accounts at the time into a new series of trusts based in another country. He was very clear. The purpose was to legally isolate these assets before filing for divorce. He said it was standard protective planning. It wasn't. It was concealment. A printed email appeared on the screen, the husband's email address. The subject line, "Urgent. Restructuring timeline." The text was a list of account numbers and the instruction, "Initiate transfers per our discussion. Speed is critical. No statements to the home address." "Is that your email correspondence?" the lawyer asked. "It is," Ferris said. "I saved it. I also recorded our final meeting when I realized the intent was fraudulent." He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket and placed it on the ledge of the witness stand. "I have it right here." When his own financial advisor walked in with a recorder, that was the point of no return. If you've ever had someone look you in the eye and choose to tell the truth, even when it cost them, you know how powerful that is. This is for everyone who believes integrity still matters. If you're here for that, subscribe, because stories like this remind us that some lines should never be crossed. The judge did not need to hear the recording. The email was enough. The look on the husband's face was enough. His lead attorney simply sat down, closing his folder with a final, soft click. The wife's lawyer turned. "Your Honor, given the evidence of systematic concealment and fraud, we ask that the petitioner's claims be dismissed in full. Furthermore, we ask for the court to grant the respondent full control of all remaining marital assets pending a forensic audit and to freeze the petitioner's individual accounts identified in today's testimony." The judge nodded slowly. Then she looked at the wife. "I'd like to hear from the respondent directly. Please return to the stand." The wife stood. She walked the few steps, her posture different now. There was no shrinking. She sat, folded her hands, and looked at the judge. "You listened today," the judge said. "You heard your family. You heard a professional. This evidence is detailed, it is specific, and it appears to have been gathered over a long period. Why did you not bring any of this forward sooner? Why let the proceedings go this far?" The wife was quiet for a moment. The whole room leaned in. "I needed him to be sure," she said, her voice calm and even. "I needed him to walk into this room absolutely certain he had won, that I was nothing, that his story was the only one that mattered." She glanced at her husband, who was staring at the floor. If I had challenged him earlier, he would have found new ways to hide things. He would have been on guard. So I let him believe his own performance. I let him get comfortable. I waited until he was in front of a judge, under oath, with his best offer on the table. That's when the truth had the most power. Not when I shouted it in our kitchen, but when it could be proven, here, where it counted. She paused, letting her words settle. "I didn't come here to argue," she said finally. "I came here to present facts." He thought my silence was weakness. It wasn't. It was patience. The husband's lead attorney shot to his feet, a last, frantic attempt to regain control of a room that had long since slipped away. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial. We have had no opportunity to examine these so-called facts, to challenge these witnesses. We move for a mistrial. Failing that, we urgently request a continuance of at least 90 days to prepare a proper defense." His voice, once so smooth and commanding, was tight with strain. He was no longer arguing the law. He was begging for time, a delay. Anything to stop the momentum that was about to crush his client. The judge removed her glasses and set them down on the bench. She looked at the husband, who had not moved, his face pale and rigid. She looked at the gallery, now filled with silent observers. Finally, she looked at the wife, sitting perfectly still on the witness stand. "Mr. Jenkins," the judge said to the husband's lawyer, her tone leaving no room for debate, "your client presented himself to this court as an open book, a generous provider with nothing to hide. You based your entire case, your settlement offer, on that premise. You cannot now claim surprise and unfairness when evidence emerges that directly contradicts that very premise. You had the same opportunity to examine the marital finances as the respondent did. She simply did a more thorough job." She picked up her gavel, her decision clear in her posture. "The motion for a mistrial is denied. The request for a continuance is denied. We will proceed to judgment." The finality of her words was a physical force. The husband flinched. One of his junior associates put a hand over his own eyes. The fight was over. All that was left was the sentence. The judge's ruling was not long, but every word was a brick in a wall, sealing the husband's fate. She cited the evidence of the drained trust, calling it a clear, premeditated dissipation of a marital asset. She referenced the shell company, labeling the transfers a fraudulent scheme to conceal income. The Costa Rican property was deemed a deliberately hidden major asset, purchased with marital funds. Then she addressed the core of his argument. This court rejects the petitioner's characterization of the respondent as a non-contributing spouse. Financial contribution is not the only measure of value in a marriage. But in this case, we find she did contribute financially, and those contributions were systematically taken and hidden from her. Her contribution was also one of patience and meticulous documentation in the face of profound deception. She laid out the orders, one after another. All joint accounts were frozen immediately. Control of all business entities and remaining assets was granted to the wife, pending a full forensic audit. The husband was ordered to surrender all passports and was prohibited from transferring any property, domestic or international. The $75,000 settlement offer was dismissed as made in bad faith. Finally, she looked at the husband. "Based on the evidence of intentional fraud upon this court, you will be responsible for 100% of your former spouse's legal fees. This matter is also referred to the State Bar for review of possible ethical violations by your counsel, and to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal fraud charges." She brought the gavel down. Crack. The sound was clean, sharp, and absolute. It was the sound of a world ending. His world, the world he built on secrets and arrogance. He didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the empty space where his legal team's perfect file had been. The lawyers beside him were already gathering their things, their faces closed off, distancing themselves from the loss. Across the room, the wife stood up from the witness stand. She did not smile. She did not look triumphant. She simply nodded, once, to the judge. Then she turned and walked back to her table. She had nothing to gather, just her single pen and the legal pad with that one underlined word. The gavel's echo faded into a heavy, stunned silence. The husband remained in his chair, a statue of defeat. His lawyers spoke to him in low, urgent tones, but he didn't seem to hear them. He was watching his wife. She took her time. She placed the cap back on her pen with a soft, precise click. She closed her simple legal pad, the one that had sat untouched for so much of the morning. She slid it into her worn leather bag. Every movement was calm, deliberate. There was no rush, no need to escape. The battle was over, and she was the last one standing on the field. She stood up, smoothed the front of her plain dress, and picked up her bag. She did not look at the gallery where her family sat. No nods, no smiles of thanks. Their job was done. This was her moment alone. She walked toward the main doors at the back of the courtroom. Her heels made a soft, steady sound on the polished floor. Click, click, click. It was the only sound in the room. As she passed her husband's table, she did not slow down. She did not glance at him. She gave him the same consideration he had given her truth for years. None. She reached the heavy wooden doors. The bailiff moved to open one for her. She paused right on the threshold. For a second, she stopped. She turned her head, just slightly, and looked back. Not at her husband. She looked at the judge's bench, at the witness stand, at the empty space where she had sat, alone, at the start of the day. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was one of simple, quiet acknowledgement. She looked at the room that had been the stage for her greatest humiliation, and now, her total vindication. Then she turned, stepped through the door, and was gone. What happens after a victory like that? It's not a party. It's paperwork. The forensic audit she was granted took 6 months. It found more hidden accounts, more diverted profits. The total value of the assets she gained control of was over $15 million. The shell company, Apex Logistics, was dissolved. The Costa Rican property was sold. The husband's business, built on a foundation of secrets, could not survive the sunlight. Key clients, learning of the fraud from the court records, walked away. Suppliers demanded upfront payments. Within a year, the company he was so proud of filed for bankruptcy. The State Bar reviewed his lead attorney's conduct. While no disbarment occurred, a formal reprimand was issued for failing to conduct basic due diligence on his client's claims. The attorney's reputation never recovered. The district attorney reviewed the case for criminal charges. In the end, they declined to prosecute, citing the civil judgment as sufficient remedy. But the investigation itself was a public record, a permanent stain. The wife paid off the legal fees, as ordered. She then used a portion of the estate to fully restore her family's trust, with interest. The rest, she invested quietly. She did not buy a flashy car or a giant house. She bought security. She bought peace. She was never quoted in the news. She gave no interviews. She simply moved on, her life no longer defined by the man who tried to diminish her. The husband? He moved too, to a smaller city. He works in middle management for a company he does not own. He lives in an apartment. The confidence, the easy smile, the tailored suits, all gone. He is a man who knows exactly what he lost. And worse, he knows that everyone else knows how he lost it. I've thought about that case for years. Not because of the money, not because of the legal twists. I think about the first hour of that trial, how every single person in that room, including me, had her figured out. We saw a quiet woman in a simple dress and wrote the whole story in our heads. She will lose. She has nothing. We were wrong. We mistook her silence for emptiness. We mistook her patience for weakness. We saw a woman who was not fighting back and assumed she had no fight in her. The lesson isn't about revenge. It's about perception. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The one who seems to be losing is often just waiting for the right moment to show you what winning really looks like. She didn't win because she got angry. She won because she got smart. She won because she understood that in a war of words, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all until you have everything to say. She taught me that strength isn't about what you show, it's about what you know, and when you choose to reveal it. So let me ask you, in your own life, when have people underestimated your quiet? When have they mistaken your patience for a lack of power? This story isn't about a divorce. It's about a recalibration. It's about the moment the scoreboard of life finally shows the true score. If you believe in that moment, if you're waiting for yours or you've already had it, then this channel is your reminder. Subscribe right now. Because somewhere, someone is watching this, feeling underestimated, and your subscription helps this message find them. Let's remind them that the final verdict is never decided by the first witness.